Willy and DMase on ESPN 1025, 1063 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Adam Vingan, Derek Mason back with us, Nick Frazier as well, here on a Wednesday morning. Willy Donick out today. As you might have heard yesterday, Willy is moving his son into college today. We will get the full report tomorrow when he returns in studio. We'll hear how much he cried on the drive home. He's preparing himself, Derek. We were talking about this yesterday. He is preparing himself for the waterworks. He talked about how he felt when he moved his daughter into college a few years ago. But the biggest change for Willy, and we'll have to get more of a report about this as time goes on, he and his wife are going to become empty nesters now. Now that his son is off to college. Derek, your children have graduated college, correct? What do you remember about moving your kids into college, and how did you handle that experience of sending your children off into the world?
First, it was, as any parent or most parents, I hope, when you go to drop your kids off, it's one of those excitements because they've accomplished one phase of their young life, meaning, going through adolescence and high school and graduating. And now they have their eyes set on something bigger, a much bigger prize. They're wide-eyed. Everything's new to them. So you take them and it's like the excitement of putting their room together. But then once all that sort of ends, the day before, you start to realize it sets in like, oh, they're not going to be around anymore. They are going to develop their own little friendships, their own little life, their own little family there at college. And as a parent, you start to worry about them, one, as I think as all parents do. And you just hope that the things that you have instilled in them, that it will carry them through, their college days and then beyond. But my daughter was ready. She's much more mature, obviously, than my son. He's mature, but he's nowhere near my daughter. But we knew she was ready, but it still didn't, change the fact that she wasn't going to be around anymore. So her mom bawled. I think her mom bawled every day we were there, cried. And I cried at the end, but it's just a dad being protective over his daughter and whatnot. But I knew she would be okay. She's one of those kids that is extremely smart, but not only smart, she sort of that street smartness in a sense, like you could just put her and you could say, okay, she's good, even though I'm gonna worry about it because I'm her dad, but she's not gonna deal with the tomfoolery, My son, on the other hand, extremely, and I mean extremely bright kid. I mean, it's amazing to me. But I looked at him different, maybe because he's the baby, and I was worried about him for one, because he was so insulated, being a young child, the youngest, and I was always worried about him. And when we finally got to that day, I bawled and cried. And then I came home and I sat in a chair. Like the next day, I was sitting eating breakfast and I started crying again because he wasn't around. And then both of them are gone. Neither one of them are at home. So it hits you in waves. One day you can be great. Then all of a sudden you think about something and then you start crying again. But all the while that, hey, listen, you just pray that what you've instilled in them, what their mom instilled in them and I instilled in them, it will carry them through college, and it will make, all we ask for them to do is make right decisions, make the decisions that you are going to be proud of later on. And thus far they have. So, I'm proud of them for that. But yeah, I don't think there's not a handbook, Adam, that I can give you right now, because yours are young, that I can give you right now and say, hey, listen, follow this handbook and you will be all right. When you and the wife drop them off at college, y'all will be okay. No, there's no handbook like that. Not whatsoever.
So what I'm preparing everybody for is when Willie is back here tomorrow, if he just starts crying on air randomly,
Yeah.
you know why. He's
Exactly.
getting adjusted to the fact that both of his kids are officially out of the house. And to Derek's point, my son turns 3 on Monday.
Mhm.
So I'm a ways away from that. But I remember going off to college and being ready to say, I'm independent. Within a couple of days, you're calling mom and dad because you need something. So that's the thing that kids will say. Speaking from experience, as I'm sure many of you can, you're ready for that independence. But as soon as it becomes real that mom and dad aren't right there for you, you're blowing up your parents' phone. It's like,
Yeah.
I need cash on my campus card. I don't know how to use an ATM. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of things you think you know when you're a
Uh-huh.
kid, when you're living at home with your parents, that you have no idea about. So I'm sure Willie will have plenty of conversations about that.
You don't need your parents until you need your parents.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is exactly right. 615-737-1025. We were soliciting advice for Willie yesterday on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com for those of you who are empty nesters, have advice for Willie as he and his wife become empty nesters. We'll pass those along to him as he drives back today from dropping his son off at school. So the Titans have one more preseason game.
Mm-hmm.
They are in New Orleans over the weekend to play the Saints. And then we've got 2 weeks until week 1 against the Chicago Bears. And I came across a quote from Brian Callahan this morning before practice that I thought was interesting, and I'd love to get Derek's perspective on it. So this is from Easton Freeze on Twitter. Titans head coach Brian Callahan has had a long honeymoon period since being hired. Freeze asked him about handling his team once things eventually go wrong. He's confident in his group. Quote, "You hope that what you've been preaching is more than just lip service. Anybody can lead when things are good. Adversity comes for everybody during the NFL season. I learned a lot about handling that during my early days in Cincinnati." End quote. So as Easton Freeze points out, there has been a long honeymoon period that often happens when there is a coaching change, because the new coach can do no wrong, because there was a reason for the coaching change. The old coach had worn out his welcome, and the new coach comes in. It's a breath of fresh air. Things are different. As Jared has said early in the tenure of Brian Callahan, there was a lot of quote unquote toxic positivity emanating from St. Thomas Sports Park, but that happens in all sports. I mean, I can speak to that as a sports fan. When a coaching change happens, fans mostly want it. They're excited about a new era. How long does that honeymoon period last? Is it over in week 1? As soon as the kickoff of the game against the Bears, is the honeymoon period over, Derek, or is it going to extend a little bit past that in your
Well,
opinion?
that honeymoon period should be over.
Or should it be over now?
Yeah, it should be. I mean, to me, now that I guess once you solidify your roster, I guess that's the demarcation point where, okay, that honeymoon started. Now we've got our roster set. We know who are going to be the guys we can count on. We know who are going to be our backups, and we know where our weak areas are. So that whole honeymoon phase is done with now. We don't have time to be doing some of the things that we were doing during camp. No, that's over with. We have real games now. Every game from this point on means something. So the whole kumbaya and all that other stuff, put it to the side. We got a season to get to. So to me, the honeymoon phase should be done by the first week of the NFL season. But there are going to be moments within, especially if they start off really good, then, people are going to continue to hang on to what has been happening from the day he got hired up until that point. They're continuing to win. But if it doesn't, I'm telling you, it's going to turn very quickly. It's not like they're going to, have the pitchforks and get him out of town, but it's going to go from being, what it is now to, hey, listen, man, you got to win. Because basically that's what this business is about. And to double down on it, you got a young quarterback, and we need to find out whether this young quarterback is the guy. So we can't have two people struggling at the same time that we're counting on. We can't have a head coach and a quarterback struggling. Somebody needs to be, doing their job and doing it at a high clip. So if he's not winning, all of that, Callahan's the greatest, and he's a great play caller, and Rand Carthon put this team together. And this is a great team. Just watch. If they're not winning, all of that goes down the drain. That's how quickly things turn in the NFL.
And that's why I like the fact, to a certain extent, that the Titans have such an early bye week. They're off in week 5. And the games that they're playing to start the season before that bye, it's an interesting mix of teams. Of course, they start at Chicago. They're home to the Jets, home to the Packers, and at the Dolphins. I feel it's a good mix of teams that are probably around them a little bit in the NFL power rankings, teams that are there's more expected of. Green Bay is expected to be a team that the people think is going to be good this season. The Jets with Aaron Rodgers coming back. I feel like it's a good mix of competition to see where this Titans team is. It's not as if though they're playing 4 lesser thans that can inflate their record. I like the mix of teams they're playing early on in the season in those first 4 games to get a sense of what this team could look like under Brian Callahan.
Yeah, I mean, what are those first 4 games? I didn't have them pulled up.
They are at Chicago in week 1. They're home to the Jets in week 2. They're home to the Packers in week 3. And they're at Miami in week 4.
Well, listen, that is a daunting task right there. You have 3 potential playoff teams. Many are predicting that they will make the playoffs in the Jets, Green Bay, and Miami. Chicago isn't no slouch either. Teams are expecting Caleb Williams to come out, and for some reason they're expecting him to recreate what CJ Stroud was able to do. I think that's such a high bar to place on a rookie quarterback just because another rookie quarterback did well. But what about the other rookie quarterbacks that turned out to be great, but their first season they struggled? I just think they're putting too much on this young man, Caleb Williams. I think he's a good quarterback and potentially be a great one, but I think only time will tell. So that first 4 games of the season heading into the bye, if they can get off on a good note, if they can even start 2-2, 3-1, I think that heading into the bye week, I think that's a good thing for the Tennessee Titans. Even to the point of if they start off 1-3, let's just say that. Well, how do they play within that 1-3? That's going to dictate whether this fan base is or those in the national media are talking down about the Titans, or are they saying, hey, listen, y'all need to watch out for the Tennessee Titans because this team, it's early on. Once they figure this out, they're not losing games by a lot. Say they lose by a field goal all 3 games, or lose by less than a field goal or less by all 3 games in all 4 games or 3 games. I said they go 1-3. Teams are going to be looking at, or people are going to be looking at the Tennessee Titans different. Now, if they go out and they get mollywopped by the Jets, mollywopped by Green Bay, and they lose to Miami in Miami when it's hot, it might be another story. You know, it's all about how does it look, the optics. How does it look each and every week with this team? Because everybody knows this is a team that needs to mature together, a team that needs to grow together. They got a bunch of new pieces. So it's going to take time for these pieces to come together. But if they get blown out 3 to 4 games, then yeah, you're going to be seeing a lot of headlines about this Titans team and whether Brian Callahan or Rand Carthon are the 2 guys that need to continue being at their respective positions. I'm not saying if they go 1-3, I'm going to be thinking that, but that's just how the NFL is. If you're not winning with a new coach and a second-year GM, people are going to be coming for you.
For some reason, and I've had this feeling for a little while, maybe since the schedule was released and we found out that the Titans would be opening this season against the Chicago Bears. I just have this sense, and if I'm wrong, people can clip this and send it to me if they'd like. I get this feeling that the game against the Bears is going to go the way that the game in week 1 for the Titans in 2019 went against the Cleveland Browns. Remember how excited people were for that Cleveland Browns team? Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham.
Hell, I was excited about the Browns. I'm not even a Brown fan.
There was a lot of hype around the Browns. Now, it's a different situation, of course, but a lot of hype around the Browns, and the Titans went in there and beat the brakes off the Browns, 43-13. Now, I'm not sure the Titans would win this game against the Bears 43-13, but I just have this weird feeling that game, because of how much excitement there's going to be about Caleb Williams and in the the additions that the Browns have made. They've got Roma Dunze now at wide receiver. They have DJ Moore back. I believe they added Keenan
Yeah,
Allen,
they
if I'm
had a
not
Keenan
mistaken.
Allen.
So they've
Injury prone Keenan
right.
Allen.
I'm a Keenan Allen fan, big game player when he's healthy. That's the
Exactly.
caveat. But a lot of excitement about the Bears. And I think a lot of people are going to expect the Bears to walk into Soldier Field in week 1 and smack the Titans around. But for some reason, I just get this feeling that the Titans are going to be the ones that end up winning that game, perhaps convincingly. I could be completely off base, but I just see these parallels between the opener in 2019 and the opener this season.
I mean, there's a huge possibility that that can happen. I would be looking for the Titans to win this game for a myriad of reasons. One being that even though I think Caleb Williams is going to be an outstanding quarterback in this league, that first game is always that sort of filling out game. You don't have much time together. You haven't practiced a lot together. Yes, you've had 2 days, but man, these practices are so cut down, and you can't do certain things, and you can only put on pads certain day, and then they don't play preseason games. If they do, they only play a half, I mean not a half, but a quarter, or maybe even a couple of snaps. So they're still not getting in the work that they necessarily need to hit the field running and going. This is a young team in regards of their quarterback, some of the people on offense, some of the people on defense. They do have veteran guys, but you're asking these veteran guys to help this young quarterback sort of expedite the process. Listen, he's really good and he may be able to do it, but I would take a more veteran team like the Titans over a rookie quarterback and a younger sort of team like the Chicago Bears. I think they have I think the Chicago Bears have a really good team. I really do. But it's going to take time, just like the Tennessee Titans. It's going to take time for them to all get on the same page. And I don't think I can take a rookie quarterback against Denard Wilson in that attack type defense in the first game of the season. Now, if they're playing, week 8, week 9, somewhere around there, then okay, I can see, because now you've had some games under your belt as a young quarterback. You've been able to truly scout this team, as the season went on. But this is the first game of the season. There's not much film you can go back and look at. You can look at the preseason game, but they're not showing you much. You can go back to Baltimore and what they did, but Denard Wilson philosophy may be a little bit different from what they did in Baltimore or any other place he was at. So I would take Denard Wilson and that defense in the first game over I think he's going to be great, but a young quarterback in Caleb Williams.
615-737-1025, our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Derek mentioned Denard Wilson's defense. There is a unit within that defense that I want to get Derek's opinion of, and we'll do that next. 615-737-1025. Adam Vingan in for Willy. Willy and DMase, ESPN 1025, 1063 The Game. Adam Vingan in for Willy Donick today. He'll be back tomorrow. Derek Mason here, back with us. Nick Frazier as well. Derek, we do have a text on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com as it relates to our previous conversation. David in Arkansas wants to know, the Bears have already said that they aren't playing any starters in their third preseason game. Could that play a factor in week one? We never fared, the Titans being we never fared well as a week one matchups under Mike Vrabel because he never played starters.
I mean, you just have to be. I know coaches and GMs, just organizations, period. They're very cautious of putting those guys out there too much during preseason. Yeah, you want to get them to get their feet wet. You want them to sort of build that rapport on the field during games, but you also too don't want anybody to get hurt. So that's a dilemma that coaches and GMs have lost sleep over, I'm sure, for years. What is the perfect balance of playing our starters compared to playing our backups? What is the best course of action to try to get them the reps they need, time on task, and not put them in a position where they can be vulnerable to injury. So they're going to continue to figure that out, I guess, until they just eliminate preseason altogether. But I think Brian Callahan said, listen, we're playing our guys no matter what. And they need to, because so many guys, key guys that they have counted on, have been injured. You have two receivers that have missed practice, probably more than that, but I'm just counting Ridley. I mean, I'm counting Boyd and Hopkins. So you've had those two guys miss time. You've had offensive linemen miss time on defense. Snead and those guys miss time. Snead, not necessarily because he's injured. They just don't want to get him injured. They're managing him sort of like a basketball player, which I don't get, but I understand it. It is what it is. So them playing in this third preseason game, I think it's a must, because this team can't afford to not hit the ground running. Chicago, they're on a plan. They're on a plan with their quarterback, even though they believe he's terrific and he can lead them to a bunch of victories this year. They're still on the plan with this quarterback. He's their future. If they start off and have a wonderful season this year, great. Absolutely great. But they have a long-term vision with Caleb Williams in this Chicago Bear team. You look at the Titans, I think the Titans are sort of thinking that same way. But even in thinking that same way, they have too many veteran guys on this team to not be able to go out there. And those veteran guys have been injured, some of them anyway. They can't afford to go out there and not have that timing all together. Again, people, I tell you, guys that are missing practice in a first-year offense with a young quarterback, that's not good. I'm not saying they can't make it up later on, but it's going to take them a minute. So I'm happy Brian Callahan is playing his guys, his starters, at least for a series, just to see how things go, how things roll with this unit. So I'm all for it. Will it help Chicago? I don't know. Will it hurt them? I don't know. Time will only tell. So I guess in 2 weeks we'll find out whether playing guys help or not playing guys hurt.
So in terms of players that have not been too active in training camp, Denard Wilson said yesterday that he has, quote, no doubt in his mind that L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie will be ready to play in Chicago. And that's the unit I wanted to talk to Derek about. I heard Robbie and Joe talking about this. I heard Jake Lyman and Teron Davenport talking about this yesterday when they were filling in for Jared. And by the way, they will fill in for Jared again today at 2 p.m. on Stillman and Company, about the secondary unit that the Titans have. And look, it's a pretty star-studded group that they have. A lot of notable names: Sneed, Diggs, Awuzie, Adams, McCreary. A really solid group in that secondary. And my question for Derek is, what do you think? Where do you think the ceiling could be for that secondary group? And I was curious about where the Titans ranked in terms of their secondary. Now, the most recent article I could find was from Sharp Football Analysis. And this article came out, I think, right before training camp started. And their team did a ranking of the top of each position group. And they, in their secondary rankings, as of late July, so probably right at the start of training camp, they had the Titans ranked tied for 12th in terms of a secondary group. Now, if I have this right, that would have been post Jamal Adams, but pre Quandre Diggs in terms of the players that were on the Titans at the time of this ranking. So tied for 12th in the NFL according to the analysts at Sharp Football Analysis. I'm just going to rattle off the teams they have in front of the Titans as of late July. The Browns, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Bears, the Cowboys, the Ravens, the Patriots, the Saints, the Vikings, the Niners, and the Buccaneers. This group has the Titans tied with the Chiefs in terms of secondary group. So there's a lot of unknown about this group. Well, we know one thing about L'Jarius Sneed. He's a great player. But this unit hasn't been together, and there's that chemistry that has to develop, as you obviously know. Where do you feel like if everybody plays to their potential in this secondary group, how high in the secondary rankings do you think this group could be this season?
Wow. I don't know much about many of these teams that are ahead of the Titans in regards to their secondary.
So
I know a little bit about Baltimore's secondary,
Yes.
obviously. I know a little bit about the Browns secondary because the Browns secondary they've been intact for a few years now. The Jets secondary, I know about Sauce Gardner. The other guy is pretty good, pretty damn good himself. But that group and that unit is led by Sauce Gardner, so they get a lot of notoriety. They get a lot of airtime because one, they're the Jets. Two, Aaron Rodgers, and then three, the defense pretty much held them together last season.
That is very true.
So when I'm looking at the Titans, if they can stay healthy, that's the caveat in all this. That's the big question mark. Why? Because Chidobe Awuzie, he's been injured. He hasn't practiced yet, but maybe a couple of days, and he's been sidelined with an injury. L'Jarius Sneed, he's been in and out of the lineup, not because he's injured, because they don't want him to get injured. They're trying to manage this knee situation that he's had over the last couple of seasons. But then you look at Roger McCreary, who's been, he's just been a good, solid player, no matter how you slice it. It's the guys behind them, Brownlee Jr., Avery, guys like that if one of these guys go down, we may have some trouble. We do. And I like Brownlee Jr. I think he's going to be a player in this league, but he's a young player. And he's still trying to figure things out. So you don't want to have to put your young player in a position where he needs to play a lot of snaps. You need him to learn behind Sneed and Awuzie and guys like that, even McQuarrie. So if this unit stays healthy, with Diggs back there, if he's back to his Pro Bowl level, which I think he will be, because it didn't seem like he dropped off last year, I think he will be. And then Adams and the guys they already have at that position, I think this could be with the coach that's coaching them, meaning Denard Wilson, I think this could be a top 5 secondary. But that's if they stay healthy. That's the big caveat. If they stay healthy. If they don't, this could be not a good secondary. I'm just going to say that.
To say the least.
It's a lot of youth. It's some youth there. Not to say that the youth won't end up being good players, but when you throw a young guy out there like Brownlee Jr., who's aggressive, who I think has the mentality to play that position, but you throw him out there his first year against, Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, guys like that he's going to have to play against, that the Titans are going to have to play against this year, that doesn't set him up for success. You want him to sort of learn from the guys ahead of him and then him be able to go in. So the ceiling for me is a top 5 secondary. The floor is, this could be below the middle of the road secondary, but it's all predicated on whether this team can remain healthy up front, one, but more importantly, remain healthy in the secondary or not.
And we mentioned the schedule earlier in the show. There's an interesting mix of receivers that the secondary group is going to face at the start of the season. In Chicago, we mentioned DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Keenan Allen. Against the Jets, Garrett Wilson. Against the Dolphins, of course, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Against the Packers, they have an interesting receiver group.
Yeah.
That number one, I don't think has emerged yet, but they have Christian Watson,
Jalen Reed.
Yeah, they have Jaden Reed. They have Romeo Dobbs. Any of those guys can beat you on any given day. So to your point, when I look at this list, but from Sharp Football Analysis, these rankings, you're right. I don't think anyone would quibble with the fact that the Cleveland Browns have the best secondary in the NFL. Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson, great. You mentioned the Jets with Sauce Gardner. They also have DJ Reed and Michael Carter.
Exactly.
The Dolphins have a lot of they have name brand players. Of course, Jalen Ramsey, Jordan Poyer, Kendall Fuller. That's a interesting group. That's a good group that the Titans are going to have to face earlier in the season. The Bears are interesting. We know they have Kevin Byard. They have Jalen Johnson. I'm not sure how much I know about the Bears secondary after that.
Jalen Johnson's pretty good corner.
He is, absolutely. The Cowboys have Trevon Diggs. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Trevon Diggs and Deron Bland, but they lost Stephon Gilmore, who went to Minnesota.
Just signed with Minnesota.
Right. The Ravens have Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams.
But I'm going to tell you the kid you need to watch, Wiggins.
Okay.
This kid's a player out of Clemson. That kid's going to be a player, man. You watch him in the preseason, this kid's going to be a player. So I can understand they're high on him in Baltimore, and I can understand why, because this kid, he's going to be along the lines of really good to great defensive backs that the Baltimore Ravens have had, since Ozzie became the GM, and now subsequently DeCosta's the GM. Now, they, just like the Titans, breed good running backs, and for a long time bred good tackles in this league, like really good ones. We believe we got one now in J.C. Latham. The Baltimore Ravens, they put out cornerbacks. They do. They have aggressive, physical, good cornerbacks, intelligent cornerbacks. So that's where the Titans want to get to. They want to get to that point. That's what Denard Walker wants to replicate. What he had when he was with the Jets, and they had one of the best secondaries in the National Football League, and when he was in Baltimore, when they had one of the best secondaries in the National Football League.
Yeah, some of these other teams that are listed above the Titans on this list, I could certainly argue with. The Saints, Tyrann Mathieu and Marshawn Lattimore are good players, but it feels like they're on the
slope,
on the back half of their career. The Vikings added Stephon Gilmore. They have Harrison Smith. I could quibble with that. The Buccaneers have one of the best safeties in the NFL in Antoine Winfield Jr. But I feel like the Titans secondary could fairly easily push its way into the top 10 if everybody clicks. And that's always the caveat with these sorts of things. If everybody clicks, if everybody stays healthy, it's the NFL. Not everybody's going to stay healthy. But if you can mitigate the injury and have those players start the majority of the games, you could be in good shape. But just with the amount that went into shoring up that position in the offseason, we haven't seen it in full yet. But week one in Chicago, it's going to be really interesting to watch what that Titans secondary is able to do. As I said, against,
you guys nothing but best. The ceiling is the roof.
I was like, where is that coming from?
The ceiling is the roof.
The magic of Nick Frazier. The first thing I thought was, is my computer on? Is my volume on?
You scared him, Nick.
You scared me there. But this group could be really, it's going to be fun to watch either way. And they'll have a test in week one against the Bears. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up next, there's a story in the NFL over the past number of days that I've really wanted to get Derek's opinion on. And, of the people, especially on this station, no one is more qualified to talk about this than Derek Mason. So I wanted to get his opinion on it. Coming up next, Adam Vingan, Derek Mason, ESPN 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Happy Wednesday, everyone. This is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose some weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution to shed some extra pounds, only to come up some pounds short. We've all been through it. I've been through it. So you're not alone in this whole process, okay? But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. You got to come at it from different angles, people. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized plan just for you and no one else. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
Can you explain to us the difference in practical terms between having a coach who did believe in you the way that he did and the difference between that and what was happening with Flores?
Yeah. Well, to put it in simplest terms, if you woke up every morning and I told you you suck at what you did, that you don't belong doing what you do, that you shouldn't be here, that this guy should be here, that you haven't earned this right, and then you have somebody else come in and tell you, dude, you are the best fit for this. Like, you are accurate, you are the best whatever, you are this, you are that. Like, how would it make you feel listening to one or the other? You see what I'm saying? And then you hear it, regardless of what it is, the good or the bad. And you hear it more and more. You start to actually believe that. I don't care who you are. You could be the president of the United States. You have a terrible person that's telling you things that you don't want to hear, or that you probably shouldn't be hearing. You're going to start to believe that about yourself. And so that's sort of like what ended up happening. And it was, I mean, it's basically been 2 years of training that out of not just me, but a couple of the guys as well that have been here since my rookie year all the way till now.
That was Tua Tagovailoa, Miami Dolphins quarterback, on the Dan Le Batard show. I believe that was late last week, talking about the difference between his current head coach, Mike McDaniel, and his former head coach, Brian Flores. And as you might expect, Derek, it led to a lot of discussion about new school versus old school methods of coaching. And Brian Flores had an opportunity to respond to those words from Tua. Brian Flores, now the defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings. This is what Brian Flores said in response to Tua's words on the Dan Le Batard program.
I think, part of coaching is correcting. I'm always going to correct. I'm always going to have a high standard. And I think, look, I've done a lot of reflecting and, on this situation and reflecting on the situation, communication. I think there's things that I could do better for sure. And I've grown in that way. And I try to apply the things that I could do better and the things that I've learned, over the last, 2-3 years. But I would say over the long haul, I've had a lot of great relationships over my 21-year career here in the league. Players, coaches, personnel, equipment, people in the kitchen. I mean, really across the board, I've had a lot of great relationships. I'm going to continue to do that. But I'm also always looking to get better and involved. No different than as a coach, whether it's schematics or personnel or evaluations. I'm always looking to get better.
That was Brian Flores, now the Vikings defensive coordinator, formerly the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, where Tua Tagovailoa started. Well, he's currently with the Dolphins, but Flores was his coach at the start of his NFL career. So, Derek, I ran through the list of coaches, head coaches that you played for in college and in the pros, and it's an interesting list. Of course, you played for Nick Saban in Michigan State. Here you played for Jeff Fisher. In Baltimore, you played for Brian Billick and John Harbaugh. You specifically went out of your way to mention George Perlis, who was your coach at Michigan State before Nick Saban. As someone who came up at a different time, when did you feel like the shift from the type of coaching that Tua claims Flores was doing in Miami and more of the softer touch, I'll call it, in coaching? Where do you feel like that shifted? And do you think there's room for the type of coaching that you received as a young player in today's game?
For me, it started to shift once I got into the NFL, because in the NFL, these are a bunch of grown men, and you have to speak to them in a certain way. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to, say a few things here and there, throw some curse word, F-bombs and all this, but you have to talk to them, not at them. There needs to be a level of respect. Yeah, they don't mind. Listen, at least from my understanding, back then, they didn't mind you getting on them. But also when I'm doing right and it shows, then you got to be able to give that praise as well. And some coaches are great at doing both. Fish was great at doing both. Some coaches are not. Listen, you didn't mention Robert Lynch, who was my high school coach. And
I didn't go back far enough. I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Those that are from the city of Detroit back then, you understand how those coaches were. They didn't give a damn who you were, how many offers you got from colleges. They didn't care if you were blue chip, or orange chip, or gray chip, or no chip. They were going to talk to you a certain way. If you wasn't doing what they asked you to do, they were just going to speak freely, and you understood it, and you took it in. And some guys took it and walked off and didn't come back. Some guys stayed in there in the fire and came out a hell of a sword, like myself. So it just depends. Perlis. I can give you a prime story about Perlis. And this was my fault. Perlis said, I chose to leave the university after the Michigan game because all the stuff that was promised, and they promise every recruit this. And now I know it. Back then, I was just gullible and young and figured, oh, they're saying this to me, then it must be true. They promise some things. I get there, that game comes, and it's nothing that they promise. I get mad and upset and throw a hissy fit, and I leave the university, and I go off at the time with my girlfriend. We leave the state of Michigan. We leave and don't tell nobody. I didn't have a cell phone. She did, but we ain't call nobody because I didn't tell her I was leaving. She didn't know I was leaving. And I don't know how my mom got in touch with me. Well, she called her because she figured, well, hell, he must be only with one person. So they called me and was like, you need to get your you-know-what back to school. Yeah, we ain't playing this. So I go back to school. I go in the Perlis's office. The Perlis like, listen, you do this again, your ass going to be back home. You're going to be back home working at some store and this and that. And your mom, all of this crazy stuff. And I listened. And I said, you know what? All right. I'm going to go back in there. I'm going to do the things that you're asking me to do. And I'm going to be the player that I expected to be when I came in here. And everything worked out fine. Saban was the same way. Saban would get on your ass in a minute. He made people quit the program. That's how much he got on guys. But it was for a reason. The guys that stood in there, we became better people. We became better players. And that team became a better team overall. When you get into college, what I've understood now in this game, there's two approaches. I mean, you can you have two approaches in at this level. Either you can dog cuss somebody, but you got to know who you're doing it to. Some players don't react; they react negatively. Some guys they react positively, and they want to prove you wrong. So they're going to go out there and do all those things that you said they couldn't do. That's the one thing, at least for me. I remember I had my 12th grade social studies teacher said, if it's up to me, you will not be getting into college. She said that to me. She said it. Luckily, it wasn't up to her, but I used that as motivation and fuel. I could have been, because that lady had rolled me the whole semester. She just didn't like me, period. She rolled me the whole semester. I could have quiveled and went and sat in the corner, and my whole trajectory would have been hampered because of what she said. But no, I didn't take it that way. I took it and I allowed it to fuel me. I said, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. You said I can't do it. You said I'm not going to get into college. Watch what I do. I got into college. I did everything that I wanted to do and accomplished the things that I wanted to do. Why? Because there were individuals that were telling me I couldn't do it. I wanted to prove to them wrong. I think this in this world today, and I'm just talking sports. I'm not talking about in life. I'm talking about in sports. These individuals come in here with a sense of entitlement. That's what they do. I'm just calling it how it is. These young men and women, some of them, they come in with a sense of entitlement. Why? Because they've been told at every step, you're the greatest. You can't do no wrong. When you do wrong, it was somebody else's problem. It was somebody else's mistake. It wasn't your mistake. We'll clear it up. We'll clean it up for you. So as they start going through this process, and not every kid is like that, but as they start going through this process, they build up this sense of, I'm him. No, you're not him. Damn it. You got to earn that right to be him. Some guys want to walk into situations as if they made it already. And sometimes coaches have to knock them down a little bit, but you got to understand how to do it and who to do it to. I'm not saying Flores was wrong or right, but what he had to understand, and it seems like he understands that now listening to his answer. There are some guys you can do it to. There are some guys you can't do it to. There are certain limits you can push, and there are certain limits you can't. Some of these kids nowadays are so thin-skinned. They walk in as if their stuff don't stink. And the minute somebody gets on them, it's everybody else's problem. It's don't talk to me like that. Oh, I can't handle it. No. What if you walked in with that attitude and I'm telling you, hey, listen, you're not there yet. Like you need to get better, or you're bad right now and you don't deserve to be on this team. Okay, well, what do I need to do to change that? I can't envision Flores getting up every day. Not to say that he probably didn't say some of this stuff, because I'm sure he probably did, and he regrets it now. I'm sure he didn't get up every morning saying, "You suck, Tua." Every morning. Well, Tua, you did suck. You were bad, Tua. Before they got Tyreek Hill and before Waddle really started to come on and before they got that, A-Train and all those guys in the backfield, you were not good, Tua. And I loved Tua in college. He was like the dude for me. One, because he went to Alabama, was playing under Coach Saban, but I thought he was a damn good quarterback.
I was about to say that Tua did not play for a kind and gentle coach in college.
But Saban understood how to massage the quarterback.
Got it.
Knew there are some positions you have to massage a little bit. The quarterback is like a golfer. You can't get on him. If he's missing putts, you can't sit there and be in his ear all day, every day. You can't. He's not gonna react positively. With quarterbacks, like golfers, like kickers, you got to massage them sometimes. Yeah, you're doing a good job. Yeah, don't worry about it. The receiver needs to go his depth. Yeah, even though it wasn't the receiver's fault. Yeah, the offensive line got, did better job blocking. Well, they gave you 3 seconds. How many more seconds they need to give you? 5, 10, 15, 20? What is it? Tua, you were not good. We were not a good quarterback, okay? You linked up with a coach that has your same personality, a sort of laid back, meek, sort of, I don't want to ruffle any feathers type of guy. Kumbaya, everybody's great. Even when you do bad, don't worry about it. Hit him on the backside. Don't worry about it. We'll get it next time. That works sometimes. It does. I'm not saying there's no place for it, but then there has to be a point where I can get on your ass and you know why I'm doing it. And you say, okay, all right, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again. But when you're continuing to do the same things wrong that I asked you to do right, and I'm showing you what to do right, what more? I've tried just about everything. Again, I'm not saying Flores is right, but I'm saying is he has to know who he's coaching, for one, and then that player has to know that, hey, listen, what is he trying to get out of me? Why didn't you go to his office? I'm not saying that he did, but it doesn't seem like Tua didn't bring that up. Why don't you go to you are the starting quarterback of an NFL team. You have the ability, like nobody else in that building, to go into your coach's office and sit him down and say, these are the things that I don't like. You're the only person that can do it. And maybe a veteran guy that has had Pro Bowls and all this other stuff, maybe they can, but you can go in that office and tell him, I don't like the way you're coaching me. You're the only person that can do it. You're the only person that can go to the GM's office and say, listen, this coach, all three of us need to have a talk. I hate when individuals, especially in sports, get on somebody else's sort of podcast and start spilling the beans without talking to the guy that they need to talk to clear everything up. You were with Flores 2 years, I think.
I think that's right. Yes.
If he was beating you down that much, and I'm not saying that he wasn't, go into his office and have a sit down, you, him, the GM, and your agent, and say some things need to change. I cannot succeed under this type of environment. But you didn't do it. You're the only person in the organization that could do it. Like Will Levis, he's the only person probably in that organization that could pull a head coach, say, we need to talk in your office. Get the GM, bring him down. All three of us need to talk. He's probably one of few that could do it in that building. You do it if it's bothering you. That's my whole thing. I just think some of these kids are skin is just too damn soft, and you can't talk to them. And the minute they don't get their way, they want a hissy fit and, I want a new contract. I want this. I want that. I'm not saying that Flores, what he did was right. I'm just saying that, listen, sometimes have a talk with the person that is doing you wrong. Have a talk with them. You can get the GM from upstairs. Hell, you could call the owner. You can. You're the quarterback of the franchise. Everybody, let's sit down because this ain't cool. I can't flourish. As I can't be the best version of myself if you keep on dumping on me every single day. Let's talk and clear this up. What, you don't like me? That's all he had to do. But to get on somebody's podcast and do this, it's like, dude, pick up the phone and call a man or talk to him while he was there. That's my whole thing. If I got a problem, if I had a problem with Harbaugh, I talked to Harbaugh. I had a problem with Fish. I went in Fish's office and talked with him. I don't have time to be getting on somebody's podcast or getting in front of the media and then spilling all my beans and my head coach or my position coach coming in the room like, dude, you could have just talked to me. I think that's what these young people are losing the sight of. That's what I preach to my son every day. If you got a problem, go talk to the person you have a problem with. You don't want to play no more, like I told him when he was in the 11th grade. And matter of fact, this is when, I'm sorry, I'm going over time, but he was in Pee Wee League football. My son said, Dad, I don't want to play no more. I said, you know what? You go tell the coach you don't want to play, but I'm not telling him, because if it comes from your dad, it comes different to the coach. You go talk to him and you tell him why you don't want to play. My son went to talk to him and told him why he didn't want to play. The coach tried to get him to play. He was like, I understand. And he didn't play anymore. He did the same thing in high school. So it can be done, but it has to be a taught behavior. You got a problem with somebody, go talk to them. Don't get on somebody else's podcast or talk to somebody else about it. Talk to that person about it. And maybe, just maybe, y'all can clear it up.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Jonathan Hutton will join us next. We'll get his thoughts on this and other things about the NFL and the Titans. 615-737-1025. Adam Vingan, Derek Mason, ESPN 1025-1063 The Game. Willy and DMase, easy for me to say. ESPN 1025, 1063, The Game. Adam Vingan in for Willy Donnick today. He'll be back tomorrow. Derek Mason, Nick Frazier, and our friend Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow joining us now. Now, Hutton, I don't know if you just heard Derek's impassioned spiel, for lack of a better term, that doesn't do it justice, about the Tua Tagovailoa, Brian Flores saga, if you want to call it that.
Yep.
What were your thoughts on that whole dynamic with Tua being so candid with Dan Le Batard, what he said about Flores' coaching style, what Flores said in response, and just the back and forth, the dynamics of coaching in the NFL today? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't hear what DMase said. I thought maybe his impassioned plea was about the bobblehead that broke in the studio. I didn't know.
I mean, it could get to that at some point.
Hey, so Dan Le Batard in the Miami area, there's familiarity there. I think Dan still does an hour show after his national show each day that is specific to that part of Florida. And if not, he used to do it. So he knows the Dolphins very, very well. The Brian Flores saga there is peculiar just because of how things have played out and how long it's been, at least in my mind. 2022 with the lawsuit, and Tua coming into the league in 2020. And the fact that here we are, Tua's just got his contract and he's still going, that deep, that hard into Flores being bad for like his playing style. It was, I don't know, the timing was like, we're rehashing this now. Like this is the first time he's had an opinion on it. Imagine how pissed off Tua was at the beginning. And again, you have Chris Greer. The way I have heard the story told, Chris Greer advocated for Tua, and it was Brian Flores that was on the podium standing on the soapbox for Jordan Love. Not Herbert, but Jordan Love. And they end up with Tua Tagovailoa. And, of course, Herbert's drafted one pick after Tua in that draft. So it's the comparison's always going to be to Herbert, but I think the debate really came down in the draft room to those two. And some coaches are hard asses. I mean, look, that's, to me, it's the old school approach to a new school approach. And by and large, there's very few coaches nowadays that have the Brian Flores approach the way Tua described it. If you look across the NFL, and the two guys that are rough around the edges, and that's putting it politely, Mike Vrabel and Bill Belichick ended up with jobs this past hiring cycle. I don't think there's any coincidence as to what players are expecting now versus maybe the way you were seeing coaches act and coach on a daily basis, and even behind the scenes in terms of tough love. I don't know. To me, that's some players handle it well, some players don't. But you got to be kidding me that Tua can't take Brian Flores' criticisms played for Nick Saban.
That's what I said, and of course, Derek would know full well what it's like to play.
Sure, absolutely.
For Nick Saban. So we were talking about before that. We were talking about the Titans secondary and what it could be league-wide. How would it stack up against the rest of the NFL if everything clicks right, which, of course, doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. And Derek thinks that at best-case scenario, that the Titans secondary could be a top 5 unit in the NFL if everything works as planned. Where are you on the potential of the Titans secondary if everything clicks, which, again, doesn't always happen, but it could?
Man, I mean, they should be among the top groups in the NFL based on the investment that they've made at the cornerback position alone with L'Jarius Sneed. And, the fact that Awuzie is also top flight corner opposite Sneed in this defense. And you got Roger McCreary playing a spot that he should be very, very good at playing with the addition of Diggs. We haven't seen these guys, though. I mean, 3 or 4 combined practices where we've seen one of the two top signings on the defensive side of the football play so far. I realize it's a one-on-one game for the most part on the outside. This is an aggressive defense. They're on an island. They've got guys that have proven in past seasons that they can be that type of player. But, I mean, until I see it, guys, and Mace, let me know your thoughts here. I'm putting the Browns, the Jets, give me the Dolphins, the Ravens. trying to think through. The Vikings have a good secondary. Certainly the 49ers have been known for it. The Titans should be in the mix for the top 10 spot. They should climb higher than that as the season progresses. But I still look at them as the bottom of this list that I just threw out there off the top of my head. Cowboys, compared to maybe where I thought they'd be at this point, which is they're helping out the Titans pass rush because they're so good at covering on the outside. I'm not trying to be pessimistic about it, guys, but I mean, there are players who practice and players who don't. And right now, we haven't seen the Titans' top 2 guys out there all that much.
So I found a ranking from Sharp Football Analysis from July 22nd. So from the beginning of training camp, these are the teams that were listed ahead of the Titans in secondary rankings: the Browns, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Bears, the Cowboys, the Ravens, the Patriots, the Saints, the Vikings, the Niners, and the Buccaneers. And the Titans were tied with the Chiefs. So that puts them tied for 12th.
Okay. Well, I mean, tied for 12th, which means some separation after the first couple of weeks. And yeah, okay. I think that's about right. I mean, again, because now this is from when? July when?
July 22nd. So right at the start of training camp.
Added. No Diggs, no additions at the safety spot at that point. So he's going off of that too. So they're probably a top 10 secondary in Warren Sharp's rankings based on what they've done at the safety spot. But like you mentioned, they're tied with the Chiefs. The Chiefs have Trent McDuffie, who is a budding star that is now their number 1 corner. Justin Reed, I believe, is still there at safety. And then Brian Cook. But they dumped L'Jarius Sneed. And the Titans' gain there still has them tied with the Chiefs based on his rankings. He's very good at what he does. I mean, based on the investment made, the Titans' secondary should be better than Kansas City's.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it too, Hut. We're talking with Jonathan Hutton, talking all things Tennessee Titans. Yeah, that's how I look at it, in regards to this secondary. I think they can be a top-notch secondary, but all of that hinges on whether, Chidobe can stay healthy. If he comes back for the first game of the season and is healthy, and then L'Jarius Sneed, I expect him to hold up the whole season. But last year and the year before that, with the whole managing, probably this year can come to a head. And no matter whether you manage it or not, he's always going to have problems with that knee. So I understand that. But if this team can stay healthy in that particular position, I think they should be. And like you said, considering the money they spent on those 2 corners, they should be one of the best. Yeah, they should be one of the best in the league once they start going.
Yeah, and Wilson, Denard Wilson has said there's no doubt that L'Jarius Sneed and Awuzie will be ready week 1. Okay, so I'll take him for his word there, and they're ready to go. But I mean, think about how imperative they are, that duo, for week 1 alone with Caleb Williams. Based on what I've seen, the off-schedule plays are going to be a nightmare, and that's where your investment pays off early, because this isn't a Titans pass rush on the edge that gets home all that often. They're looking for 4 guys they can rotate in and feel comfortable with alongside Harold Landry. The pass rush is from the interior. There are going to be a lot of off-schedule plays based on how the Titans' defensive front is built. And that's where Caleb Williams is going to flourish if he's going to early in his rookie season. I doubt they're going to be very structured in how they go about game planning for the Titans, because if not, you're not getting the most out of Caleb Williams at this point. From what I've seen, whenever he's played well in the preseason. Been a lot of off-schedule plays, and that puts a lot of pressure on your secondary to show up and show out and win your fair share of battles in a league where the rules are already stacked against you. And it's a pretty good wide receiving core there in Chicago too. Again, I think it's a fascinating matchup just because you don't really know what to expect from a rookie making his debut in a league where they're going to throw the football and you're rewarded for doing so. And he's going to get out of the pocket and try to make it happen. And these 2 corners got to be ready to go for Tennessee. If so, they can get home to him and they can, put him on the ground a few times.
Now let's switch over to the offensive line. I know we've talked about the offensive line ad nauseum. I get it. But recently Brian Callahan said, listen, Brunskill, I mean, not Brunskill, but Frere and who's the guard?
Radens.
Yeah, Radens. He said they're trending to be the starters. I'm
Yeah,
not
they're the guys.
I'm not too encouraged by trending to be the starter. I think at this point, after 2 games, you should know who your starters is headed into your
I
third
think they know,
preseason
though.
game. But does that leave open the possibility, because we know how this league work, Hut,
Yep.
you followed it a long time.
Yep, go ahead. I know where
When
you're
guys get hurt, I mean, when guys get cut from other teams, do you think they will be looking to bring in a starting guard or a starting tackle?
Oh, I mean, I think they would love to, but here's the thing. Right now, with that quick of a turnaround, I mean, yeah, Nicholas Petit-Frere is going to be the starting right tackle, and Dylan Radens is at guard. Brunskill's going to make the roster, and then beyond that, I would say Rupchich, with the way they've talked about him, is another one, and they're probably looking for 2 more guys of this group. There's a lot of mixing and matching going on last week in a game that was all about the backups. That's where I think they try to upgrade the most, Mace, is trying to find the rotational pieces behind Nicholas Petit-Frere and Dylan Radens. And that's just because, I mean, for as difficult as it's been for us to discuss the right side and who's starting and who's not, it's hard to find 9 offensive linemen that they'll want to carry on a weekly basis. That's the depth. It has to improve drastically. Think about if they have an injury right now on their O-line.
Yeah.
And how they would have to move guys around, because you'd have, if something happened with NPF, or let's say something happens early with JC Latham, Nicholas Petit-Frere is probably popping outside the left tackle. Radens is your right tackle, and Brunskill's playing guard. But Brunskill, is also a player who they worked in at center some. They've got Corey Levin. I mean, again, it's a hodgepodge. That to me is where they have to upgrade on the waiver wire, is beyond the starting 5.
Yeah, you're right about that, Hut. We're talking with Jonathan Hutton, Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow. Now looking at this team, obviously, from a offensive standpoint, you look at guys that have played in preseason and guys that haven't played in preseason. I was listening to Jared the other day, and he talked about him being disappointed that some of the guys didn't play in this past preseason game, whether they got a lot of time during the joint practices or not, guys like Burks and some other guys. But I think what he doesn't understand is, and I want to know your opinion based upon those guys not playing in that game, because he's right. Some of these guys do need the reps, but when you've gotten good reps and it's been like game like tempo in practice with another team, I think that's more valuable than then putting them out there during a game and asking them to play a couple of snaps with some guys that are second and third stringers. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how the week went if I'm the coach.
And
it
seemed like the week went well based upon what Brian Callahan said.
I think it was just predetermined, though, in a way, because like Ridley last week is discussing, I think it was the first practice against Seattle, maybe, about how his tempo wasn't there. Like he wasn't playing fast enough or focused enough within the offense. And I think I was reading an article through the Tennessean on that. Nonetheless, Mace, there's a rhyme and reason to when I would play certain players and when I wouldn't. But there's a reason why this team, I think, needs to play these live reps, and it's especially the offensive line. O-line together, Will Levis with his first true season as this team starter, and trying to get some cohesion going between Ridley and Levis especially. But even last week, we wouldn't have seen Tyler Boyd because of the foot thing. He's back going through a walkthrough yesterday, so that's good. I'm trying to think through. We know we're not going to have D-Hop and see him play. And, you've got Burks who's playing the X because Hopkins is out. And then you have Nick Westbrook-Akina who's playing a lot of reps because of the numbers, because he can play every spot at wide receiver. I don't know what one series does, but there was an emphasis on playing them in the first preseason game to get some momentum going. And there's a reason why Levis went back out there to start the second quarter in the week one of the preseasons to go score a touchdown and put an emphasis on that offensively. I would be hesitant to just say, hey, we're predetermined. We're not going to play right now. We're not going to play the starters, even though I will say this, the starters got the vast majority of reps in the joint practices against Seattle. So if you're looking to determine who's going to make your roster and you haven't seen the true depth of your team in a week, that's the time to go throw them out there against competition to show them something that they haven't seen. So whenever this team is a 4-win team or an 8-win team, Mace, or 10, whatever they end up, we're not going to reference the second preseason game as a reason why.
Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton Withrow on Willy and DMase. Jonathan, thanks. Hutton, I'm sorry I called you by your first name, your
I
formal
did that
name.
too, bro. Don't worry about it.
Who's Jonathan?
See, that's not the answer you gave me, but that's between Hutton.
Yes, that's for off air. Hutton, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Always enjoy this.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines driven by wilsoncounty.com. Will Levis is at the podium now. We'll hear what he has to say after practice on the other side. 615-737-1025. Tune in. With coverage also available on 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. Sounds Baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks Family Leisure, 5 Points Roofing, and Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Be a hero and save a life today at the 11th annual Williamson County Battle of the Badges blood drive. Every 2 seconds, someone is in need of blood. And in the last 11 years, this drive alone has collected over 3,000 units of blood, saving up to 9,000 lives. The drive is currently being held at John P. Holt Brentwood Library until 6 p.m. 1025 The Game will be on hand from noon to 2 with swag to give away and a chance to win free concert tickets. So if you're in the area until 2 o'clock at John P. Holt Brentwood Library, 1025 The Game will be out there. And also donate blood, save a life. Adam Vingan in for Willie Donick today. Derek Mason. Thanks to Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow for joining us in the previous segment. Will Levis addressing reporters. We will play what he has to say coming up. But Derek, what did you take away from our conversation with Hutton? What stood out to you?
I think he sees this secondary. Okay, first let's address what he said about the offensive line. I think he's right in the sense of, they pretty much know who their starters are. And if indeed they do bring in more offensive linemen, say guys get cut from other teams that could potentially be starters, they still have to work those guys in. They can't just pick them up from another team and plug them in as a starter. Why? Because they don't know the offense. So they still would have to work their way in to that starting rotation. So he's right from that standpoint, which I didn't think about. So what we see now, I think it's, what they believe it will be first game of the season. But if they can upgrade at that position via some moves that will be made once cuts are made, I'm sure they will. But will it be an immediate guy to start, whether it be a right tackle or right guard? And then what he said about guys playing, I think it was predetermined. Hey, listen, if we can get some good work with these guys in this joint practice, then we're going to hold them out of the preseason. He felt he got good work from Traylon Burks, from the tackle, from the guard, from the receivers. Even in what I was surprised in, even Nick Westbrook-Akine, who had a good 2 days of practice with Seattle, he still played in the game. I think he probably wanted to play. I truly believe he wanted to play. They asked whether you want to play or not. I think he wanted to play because at the end of the day, I think Nick Westbrook-Akine is just a football player. He will play if it's, if you're down 100 or if you're up 100. I think he still wants to go in the game and play because he enjoys playing the position. So I understand what Hut was saying about, predetermining. And even if they probably didn't have a great practice, he had already predetermined who wasn't going to play and who was, and he stuck with it. Now, some guys that didn't play, I thought they shouldn't have played. He was right. But then some guys that, didn't play should have played. More importantly, the offensive linemen. I don't care how good you were against, them in practice. I still want to see you out there on the field because we're trying to build this offensive line.
So to your point, Derek, I'll call it a lukewarm endorsement from Brian Callahan when he said that Radins and Petit Frere are trending in the direction as being the starters. It wasn't a full-throated endorsement. These are our guys. And with the problems that the offensive line has had, and they've also had to adjust to the unexpected departure of Sadiq Charles, which caught everybody by surprise, including the Titans, who I remember saying, was it last week, that Bill Callahan didn't even hear from Sadiq Charles. Hopefully Sadiq Charles is doing all right. But Wes in Clarksville on our text line says his issue, and I think a lot of people's issue with the offensive line, is they are barely making it as it is. If one or two get hurt now, we are done. We have no depth.
Well, you're right about that. There's no depth on this offensive line. There's not much depth with this team in particular. Other than the running back position, the wide receiver position, and gosh, that's really about it. Maybe not even the secondary. I don't know where else do they have depth. Well, maybe the linebackers, you can say, They have some depth there. But if you're looking around, there's not much depth on this team behind like the first 3 or 4 players. There's not much depth on either side of the ball.
No, there really is not. Teron Davenport, who will be in studio this afternoon with Jake Lyman filling in for Jared starting at 2 o'clock, has some of his camp notes. In terms of injuries, Teron mentions that Caleb Farley and Tyler Boyd returned to practice.
Well, that's good.
So Farley and Boyd have returned. Boyd was dealing with a bruised foot. No Josh Wiley, Kearis Jackson, TK McClendon, Luke Gifford, Chidobe Awuzie, or L'Jarius Sneed. Not a surprise on Awuzie and Sneed. So Tyler Boyd back at practice. And yesterday when you were out, Derek, Willy was talking about Tyler Boyd and expectations for Tyler Boyd. You know, where do you see his role in this offense and just how important is a player like Boyd, a receiver who goes about the game like Boyd, for the development of a young quarterback like Will Levis?
I think it's pivotal to have somebody like Tyler Boyd, that can speak to what Brian Callahan is trying to do from an offensive standpoint, can speak to, what he believes Will Levis is looking for, so he can tell the younger receivers, even the older receivers, like, man, listen, based upon my experience in this offense, this is what the quarterback should be looking for. This is what you should be doing as a receiver in this offense. So he can be the conduit between, the head coach and the player. Not every time they got to run to the head coach / offensive coordinator and ask him questions, or they don't have to run to their receivers coach to ask questions. They can sit there and they can pull Tyler Boyd to aside, because that's the last thing young players want to do is go to their coach, even though they may have a great relationship with their position coach. Go to their coach and say, what do I got on this? Do that, because you just feel like you want your coach to feel as if you know it all. So you go to a guy that's willing to help, that has been in this offense, that's a veteran guy, which Tyler Boyd is. You go to Tyler Boyd and say, listen, did I do what was asked of me? Should I run it a little bit different? And Tyler Boyd should be able to tell you whether it's a guy on the outside or inside, based upon what he's been through, what he's seen in his offense. Yeah, you should do it like this. Well, or maybe you did it the right way, but you need to deal with the quarterback as far as how y'all see this thing sort of panning out or whatnot. So they don't have to go to a coach, because Tyler Boyd is giving them the answers that they need. So to me, he's going to be critical in what they do, not necessarily from a statistical standpoint, but from a point of, I know what I need to do. I know what y'all need to be doing. If y'all need to ask me anything, I should be able to help you to alleviate some of the angst, especially a young guy, to alleviate some of the angst of you going to the offensive coordinator / head coach or the receivers coach. You can come to me, and then I can give you an answer based upon my history and my experience in this offense.
So Paul Kaharski at paulkaharski.com revealed his 53-man roster a week out from the end of the preseason. And we were talking about depth in the secondary. According to Paul, he's got 4 locks at safety: Diggs, Hooker, Molden, and Adams. He has Matthew Jackson being the last man off at safety, with Molden now available for special teams. At corner, Kaharski has Sneed, Awuzie, McCreary, Brownlee, and Gabe Jeudy-Lally. He writes, Gabe Jeudy-Lally's been good enough to be a certainty. Trey Avery is a drop-off in coverage, but he'd also be the 5th outside option and the 3rd inside, with Brownlee shifting inside for McCreary if he's hurt. Plus, they have big nickel and dime options that will involve safeties. Avery has played a good bit of gunner on the punt coverage team, which is what gives him his chance. So, according to Paul, his feeling, his informed speculation, he's got Diggs, Hooker, Molden, and Adams as the safeties, Sneed, Awuzie, McCreary, Brownlee, and Jeudy-Lally as the corners. What do you think about that?
I think that's pretty much spot on. That's the way I would have seen it. I don't think Avery did himself any justice getting beat for a touchdown this past weekend. He's a veteran guy. You're playing against their 2nd and 3rd stringers, and you get flat out beat. You look like a first-year corner rather than a, 3rd or 4th year, somewhere around there. You don't look like a veteran corner. So I just think after that game, he pretty much signed his own papers as far as him being on this team. I think they have some young talent. They need to develop that talent. I think the two guys that he have on that list at corner, both of those guys are young, and they can sort of work their way in this Denard Wilson defense. And they can be taught the things that they need to do. They haven't developed any bad habits just yet. Avery has, and it doesn't seem like he's gotten out of them. I'm not saying that he's a bad player, but he's just, because of the numbers, I don't think he make this roster. He'll be on somebody else's roster, but this roster, where this team is headed, he doesn't have a place.
Paul also has on the defensive line, he has 6. Simmons, Sweat, Joseph Day, and Coburn as his locks. Bohanna and McClendon, the back end guys. But McClendon is injured. He has a turf toe injury, which Paul notes can linger. Marlon Davidson out for the year with a biceps injury. So the question is that line good enough to hold, or are the Titans going to have to seek outside help on the D line before the season starts?
Wow. I think they're always going to be looking to update this roster. And I think, that the GM and the head coach has said as much. If you listen to any GM and head coach in the league, they're always looking to update and improve their roster. So when you're looking at the guys that he have interior wise, I think this is a good group, but I think a lot of it is predicated on what Sweat is able to do as a first year player in this defense. So I think if he pops, then that rotation becomes a little less worrisome. If he pops, I think the other guys that Paul mentioned have earned their right to be on this team in some facet, whether it be playing, on Sundays or Mondays or Thursdays a lot, or being a special team sort of core guy. So that position, I think, I would say the same guys Paul said, I would say the same, but knowing that they're always looking to upgrade. So that fourth and fifth, or that fifth and sixth guy, just because you made the roster doesn't mean you made the roster. You can make the roster on cut down day that morning, and then by the next day on Tuesday or Wednesday, they have already replaced you, and now they're looking to move you either to the practice squad or they're just cutting you, period.
615-737-1025 phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Will Levis just wrapped up speaking to reporters at St. Thomas Sports Park. We'll hear what he had to say next. Tune into the Chase and Big Joe show tomorrow from 9 to 11 a.m. for your chance to win tickets to see Sammy Hagar at Bridgestone Arena on August 28th. Contest presented by Green Trees. Adam Vingan in for Willy Donick, Derek Mason, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. This week's Nashville Best Deal is Bavarian Beer House, Nashville's only authentic German beer hall, a place full of fun, food, music, and most importantly, beer. Enjoy traditional German bratwurst, schnitzel, giant pretzels, and more. In an Oktoberfest-inspired space, head to theGameNashville.com/deals now to get a $50 gift card for only $25 to Bavarian Beer House while supplies last. Will Levis, Titans quarterback, just finished addressing reporters at St. Thomas Sports Park. Here is what he had to say.
Be able to feel that rhythm before getting out there on Sunday and getting one kind of last opportunity to play as a group together. And definitely was a confidence booster. It's cool to get down there. I don't know how many plays that drive was in the call period, but it was good to sustain that drive and finish it on the right note, especially after kind of a shaky start to the day. Being able to pick ourselves back up and lock in for those periods was awesome. So a lot of guys touching the ball. Felt like I was seeing it well and feeling it well, and it's coming together at the right time.
You had that one early play with Traylon out cut to the sideline that was a little bit high, and then I saw you later talking with him and kind of gesturing. Were you discussing that play and what happened on that?
Just how I thought we could have detailed the route, and he felt one thing and I felt another, and we just got to watch the tape, and when it comes up next time, we are both expecting the same thing. So I could have made him right and at least give him a chance to go up and get it. But just think based on how a corner played it that we could have kept it a little higher. But he's got to be confident and fast in his decisions, and I got to put the ball where it needs to be. And both of us, I think, could have been a little better there.
Indicated maybe play a handful of series on Saturday. What would you like to accomplish here? And how do you feel like the readiness level is a couple weeks out from the season?
I think we feel really ready. I think we had the game plan for New Orleans given to us yesterday, like the intro to the base down stuff. And it's cool to see a game plan and be like, yep. Like pretty much feel like you can go out and play that day. So I feel like we're all in a really good spot with our knowledge of, what's at our hands playbook wise, and really do think we're in a really good spot. But I think in terms of goals for this weekend, it doesn't change. Just do my job, not trying to do anything too crazy, and just keep leading us and keeping drives sustained and making the right calls. So I'm excited to go out there and have another opportunity to be clean with our starters.
Tyler can wait back into the next step for you, maybe being get us out of bad plays, when you're up the line and so forth. I guess, how do you feel your progress is coming along, and what are the most challenging things for quarterback?
I think it's like when you're given those tools to do those things for the first time, like you could second guess yourself pretty easily. Like when you don't have the confidence in the background of doing it in your past. So, but I think I know I've a good enough handle on to know, when things are messed up and what could possibly get us out of that situation. And I think game plan wise, Callie will do a great job too of letting me know what my issues are on that play. And I think it'll be more of like, hey, if we get this specific look on this, it's not going to work. Let's think about getting into something else. So having that kind of catalog of things to get to based on whatever personnel is out there on the field, based on whatever the coverage we think it is I think I feel comfortable doing that, and I'm looking forward to getting to that point where it comes a lot more natural.
You said one of the things that he likes about you that makes him feel like you're that guy is, your ability to bounce back after making a mistake. And he talked about the direct communication that he has with you. What is it that makes you able to bounce back and put that away and come back and do what you need to do?
I think it probably goes back to earlier in my career when I couldn't do that. Like as a high schooler and young college athlete, I think it was very easy for me to let my past affect what's coming up in the future. So I was very emotional. I was, anytime I made a bad throw or a bad decision, I was really down on myself and made me press and act a certain way. But I feel like, towards the end of my college career, I was able to phase that out and understand that it's only going to hurt me, and to just keep that neutral attitude with every play. So, we don't want to mess up much, but when we do, we want to be able to come back with the confidence and the ability to go and make the play, whatever that may be, the next play.
He said he thought you'd audible by the end of the season about 20% of the time. You have an estimate for probably what you audibled last year?
I couldn't tell you right now, no. I don't know. I mean, by audible, I don't know exactly what he means, like with attached, cans or whatever, but.
He was talking about checking out, like you said, for trouble.
Yeah, it was probably less than that, probably.
Well, when it comes to Tyler Boyd, and we spoke on him before, but kind of his transparency. And I know even talking with wide receivers on the side after a play, he said he's not shy to vocalize that. How much has that helped in certain situations, maybe not only with you, but these other wide receivers in that room?
Yeah, that's the only way we're going to get better. We can't just, head nod and, yep, we're good, we'll get it next time. We got to talk through it and see what details can be tweaked to make sure that we're more consistent with it. So those guys have done a really good job of communicating with what they see and feel. And I'm being honest with them, right back to them. And we're trying to find that middle ground. And when we get the opportunity to watch it afterwards, we can see who may be right, who may be wrong. But it's just good to have those open dialogues and healthy dialogues with each other so that we can get to the efficiency level we want to get to.
Did you enjoy getting Boyd back into the fold? Like a veteran player, a guy who knows this offense really well, like it's pretty involved today. How much do you feel his presence every time he's in there? And I guess not having him and now having him make you appreciate him just a little bit more.
You say TB, sorry?
Yeah.
I mean, I told him that I was happy to have him back. And it was funny. I think the only ball on the ground in RVAs was my first throw to him. And I was like, shoot, might need to dial back up with him. But I felt him, the rest of the day, and he was right where I wanted him to be. And I feel like we got a really good connection, and we just got to keep working. He's a special player. He's been in this league for a long time for a reason. He's got a great understanding of this offense and, what works and what doesn't, and how to get us into the best spots to succeed with whatever he's doing. So he's been a lot of fun to play with, and it's good to have him back.
Been pretty optimistic about DeAndre and his hopes of being back for week 1. You stay in contact with him, and you feel like what you guys built last year up until the time he left this year, you can kind of hit the ground running?
Yeah, no, it's good to have him here and rehabbing to get back and better for week 1. So I was texting him when he was away for a little bit, and I just know that he's working his tail off to get back and be ready to play. But it's again going to be another piece that when someone's hurt for a little bit, it's sometimes hard to remember like the contributions that they were able to make when they were there. So we're excited to have him back, and I know he's going to be a big time player and piece in this offense.
Brian said in a lot of ways for you to make the biggest strides now is about the mundane stuff and kind of mastering the mundane stuff. You kind of agree with that, and it's not very glamorous for an NFL quarterback with picture the big plays and all of that, but where are you with the mundane stuff, and is it hard at all to keep focused on the smaller stuff?
For sure. No, I feel really good about it, especially with, reads and not passing up a read to get to what we're really trying to dial up. I think I've done a better job of just taking something if it's open on the first go around. And even though I might think based on how the play's developing that bigger shot might be open as well. It's good to have the conversations and watch the film for when that window does get closed and how everything else get closed. And, your one option that you had in the beginning was the only one you really had. So understanding that and just taking what they give me, but it's definitely difficult at times to feel, when's the right time to try to get out of the pocket and make a play or try to stick one in there when the coverage might be a little tight. And that's why I've just been, playing with that throughout camp and feeling like what situations when they present themselves are appropriate for those things. I think today in the red zone period, we talk about never taking any sacks in the red zone. And I feel like in the back of my mind, I'm really thinking that, and I'm going through 1-2 progression, and I had a throwaway. But in reality, I bet when I watched the film, guys were holding up for a really good amount of time up there, and I could have progressed to that third progression. So it's just going back and forth and feeling when the opportunities are there to try to make those plays and to stick in the pocket or to stick those throws in there, and when it's the time to just take your medicine and move on.
What are you looking to accomplish?
Brian said that Tony and Tajay are two of the best backs he's ever seen in terms of pass protection. As a quarterback, how much do you appreciate running backs will stick their head in there, pick up a blitzer for you?
It's awesome to see. It fires everyone up in the team room when that tape goes on and everyone knows who the back's got or he's able to scan across for his guy and stick somebody. They're not the biggest guys in the world, but they're strong and they're aggressive and they're explosive and they're able to get up underneath those guys and make them feel it. So that's awesome to see. It gets me even more fired up than them ripping a big run. It's them, their sacrifices and contributions for the greater good of the team, and that's what it's all about.
Well, what are you looking to accomplish specifically with the O-line and those starter reps you guys get Sunday?
I think just efficiency, like what I was saying before, being able to be on the same page and knowing the different types of looks that we can get. We know that we might get a variety of looks, especially on third down. So being able to making sure that we know kind of what their packages are and them to be locked in on their combinations, and I want to be able to, feel good back there on third down, dropping back or whatever we might have at our disposal. So I think it'll be a good opportunity for them with the variety that we think we might be facing. And how about points? That's what we want at the end of the day. So that's what I'm expecting, and that's what we want to get.
Well, did you have the same kind of freedom to make checks at the line of scrimmage last season, or even at Kentucky that you do now?
A little bit. We would talk like, hey, if we get 0, this is our like menu of answers, or but you can get to this versus this. But wasn't doing much in terms of like if I felt there was a pressure into the run, like getting something else up or what have you. But yeah, a little bit of last year, not much in college. Yeah.
When you are dropping back, like you said, and going through your progressions, and you feel the pockets a little bit cleaner, how have you noticed that progress over the last couple of weeks out here at practice when the front five has kind of started to really set itself?
I think it's just their knowledge and their ability to continue to understand our defense and what we play and the different types of games that they're playing up front and the different pressures that we're getting, and them to just kind of know it's coming before it even happens sometimes. So when they have that confidence, and after they've gotten the reps that they have against this defense, it feels a lot better back there, and they've been doing a good job of holding up their guys. So credit to them, and we just got to make sure that we're working every week to know those things in a week's time to get ready for those Sunday games. So, credit to them. It felt really good back there, and we just got to keep working.
Callahan has said that he welcomes pressure and he likes pressure because it means there's expectations.
Mm-hmm.
For you, what's your take on that? Is that something that you welcome as well?
Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant like pressure, like blitzes. I was like, yeah, we love it. We'll smack him in the mouth and more space on the field. Yeah. No, pressure is a privilege, and I feel like I've always felt that. I think the more that you're focused on what other people are going to be thinking about you based on how you act and what the outcome of your actions are, then the more that it can weigh on you. But I think I'm just more solely focused on myself and people here. And I know as long as I'm just doing my best to work to get myself to the level I know I can get to, then that's all I can do. So pressure's cool. Pressure means there's a lot of eyes on you, and there's a lot of people counting on you to succeed. And I welcome it with open arms.
First batch of cologne has sold out.
Yeah, they did a couple of drops. I think we've sold thousands of bottles so far, so I don't know the exact number, but awesome. Just a really, really cool thing. I don't think they're planning on dropping anymore, so that's pretty much it. But they both sold out in a pretty fast amount of time, so yeah, I'm really excited. I don't have a lifetime supply of the cologne, but I might have to add that to the contract. But yeah, I just got one bottle right now. Hopefully I can make it last for a week. But no, yeah, it's good stuff. You guys, you smelled it obviously, but yeah, a lot of fun.
I noticed you talking to Hasselbeck when he was here last week. I know he's kind of raved about you in the past. What's the connection like with him? How much did you follow his career?
Yeah, he was I don't know the exact title they used at the combine. You're our like mentor / group leader. So he was my group of 8 quarterbacks or whatever. He was our guy leading us around Indy the whole week. So he was a great guy to get to know then, and someone my dad's been in contact with, and I've just kind of been in contact with throughout my career. So really respect him and the knowledge he's got for the game, and it's always great seeing him and talking ball.
That was Titans quarterback Will Levis not too long ago at St. Thomas Sports Park, addressing reporters after practice. Derek and I will react to some of what Will Levis had to say on the other side. Adam Vingan, Derek Mason, ESPN 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willy and DMase, ESPN 1025, 1063, The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Adam Vingan in for Willy Donig today, Derek Mason, Nick Frazier here on Wednesday afternoon. We just heard from Titans quarterback Will Levis after practice. But before we react to Will Levis, there was one note from practice that I didn't get to when we were talking about it earlier, Derek. This from Teron Davenport, who, along with Jake Lyman, will be here in an hour, filling in for Jared on Stillman and Company. Traylon Burks went down after a back shoulder throw from Will Levis. He landed with Trey Avery and stayed down for a bit. He talked to the head trainer, limped off the field. Burks tried to walk it off, then went into the building. He was holding his back/hip. So we were out at practice last week for the Seahawks practice, joint practice. We saw Will Levis try to go deep to Traylon Burks. Ultimately, he escaped injury. It was a cramp, but he did have to leave the end of practice. According to Teron, Traylon Burks went down after a back shoulder throw from Will Levis, had to leave the field. He was holding his back/hip. It just seems that the injury bug will not leave Traylon Burks alone. And we've talked about this quite a bit over the last week or so, and much longer than that, Derek. Just Traylon Burks needs all the breaks he can get. And to hear that he went down with an injury after practice is disconcerting.
Man, this is a physical sport. And, just because you don't get contacted doesn't mean you're not going to hurt yourself. Unless they come out and put out something that says that he's going to miss some time, I wouldn't worry about it. It's just, you go up for a ball, back shoulder pass, and you land on the ground. Remember, the ground doesn't give much, and the ground is not going anywhere. The ground is hard. You're landing on it. So you may bruise your body, even though you lift a bunch of weights and you run, so you can kind of sort of, lessen that impact on your body. It's still there. So when you fall on the ground, you're going to, hurt, bruise a muscle or something. So let's just hope it's not serious enough to keep him out at any time in regards to, one, games, but then two, practice, because they already got one receiver down in D-Hop. Tyler Boyd just got back. You don't need another going down. And then for Traylon, he doesn't need it for his career. I mean, he needs, the one thing he needs to prove to people is that he can stay on the field. They know once he's on the field, he has the possibility of doing good things to great things. But keeping him on the field has been the problem. So, I'm not too concerned, but, if this thing continues to progress and, it causes him to miss significant time, then that's when I think we're going to start to have a problem.
So Brian Callahan, if I'm not mistaken, spoke before practice. So there will be no update on Traylon Burks today. So we'll see what happens there. But according to Teron Davenport and others at St. Thomas Sports Park, Traylon Burks had to leave the field during practice because of an apparent injury. So back to Will Levis. There was one question and answer in there, Derek, that caught my attention, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. He was asked about doing the mundane. And we know that Will Levis has a bazooka for an arm. We know that he can fling the ball downfield. All quarterbacks want to make big plays. I know when you played, when that quarterback cocked that arm and threw it long, you wanted to be there for that big play.
Exactly.
But sometimes you have to take the less exciting route to get to where you need to go. Here's what Will Levis said about that.
That in a lot of ways for you to make the biggest strides now is about the mundane stuff and kind of mastering the mundane stuff. You kind of agree with that, and it's not very glamorous for an NFL quarterback with picture the big plays and all of that. But where are you with the mundane stuff, and is it hard at all to keep focused on the smaller stuff?
For sure. No, I feel really good about it, especially with, reads and not passing up a read to get to what we're really trying to dial up. I think I've done a better job of just taking something if it's open on the first go around. And even though I might think, based on how the the play's developing, that bigger shot might be open as well. It's good to have the conversations and watch the film for when that window does get closed and how everything else get closed. And, your one option that you had in the beginning was the only one you really had. So understanding that and just taking what they give me, but it's definitely difficult at times to feel, when's the right time to try to get out of the pocket and make a play or try to stick one in there when coverage might be a little tight. And that's why I've just been, playing with that throughout camp and feeling like what situations when they present themselves are appropriate for those things. I think today in the red zone period, we talk about never taking any sacks in the red zone. And I feel like in the back of my mind, I'm really thinking that, and I'm going through 1-2 progression, and I had a throwaway. But in reality, I bet when I watched the film, guys were holding up for a really good amount of time up there, and I could have progressed to that third progression. So it's just going back and forth and feeling when the opportunities are there to try to make those plays and to stick in the pocket or to stick those throws in there, and when it's the time to just take your medicine and move on.
Derek, what are your thoughts on that? And I'm also curious, if at all, how much a receiver can play into that in terms of making sure that Will Levis takes what he's being given as opposed to perhaps forcing a play that's not there.
This is something that I think Will's going to have to sort of fill out as the year gets going, because he's, and I said this last year, because of the offensive line and this offensive line, let's just be frank about it, and you don't want to really rehash what happened last year because you're trying to look forward. But in this particular for the sake of this conversation, you have to. He developed bad habits because of the offensive line wasn't good enough. He tried to hold on to the ball long enough to give his receivers opportunities to get open because he knew that his offensive line, the only way he was going to be able to get the ball down the field majority of the time was to hold on to it a little bit longer than what he should. Why? Because the offensive line just frankly wasn't protecting him well. He has to unlearn those things that he learned last year. He developed those bad habits. Now, in this offense, he has to learn that he may have more time than what it appears. I think his body naturally reverts back to last year. I don't have enough. Oh my goodness, I gotta do something. Where in actuality, that's why he talked about going back, going back and looking at the film. Like, maybe I had a little bit more time than what I thought. But your mind is telling you, because of what has happened to you, it's trauma. And I don't want to make it seem like it's light, because trauma is huge. And I know outside of football, trauma is huge, really huge. But in this terms, the trauma that he's developed, he keeps referring back to. He needs to slowly allow that stuff to sort of dissipate and to learn to live with the offensive line that he has now and trust that they are going to get the job done. This isn't the offensive line coach from last season. Trust what Bill Callahan is doing. Trust what you're seeing on film, that these guys are going to be able to get their blocks and you can hold on to the ball a little bit longer than maybe you tried to do last season. I think as the more they play, he will develop that. He will understand it. His body will get used to being in a pocket for longer than 2 seconds or a second. His body and his mechanics will get used to that offensive line giving him 3 seconds to throw the ball. I'm not saying they're going to be like that every time, but if you're like that enough, my body reacts to it. And now I know once I take the snap, at least I have 2.5 to 3 seconds to throw the football. My receivers can get in their routes. I can throw it on time, and this offense can flourish. Well, he's still trying to work those kinks out from last season, because last season the offensive line was abysmal. It was just bad. So it's going to take him a minute. So, I think he said all the right things. I think he understands that this is a process, that more times than not, when he goes back to look at the film, things probably looked a little bit different than what he actually saw it to be, or what his mind thought it was, based upon what he had went through the previous season. So they got a lot of work ahead with Will Levis. And I do mean that. Not because I don't think he's a good quarterback, but because he has to remove all those bad habits that he developed last year because the offensive line was horrible.
He also talked about how much he's grown in terms of being able to put bad plays behind him.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's easier said than done. Players in his position, players in any position in any professional league, they get there because they're great in some form or another. And look, even in everyday life, I know this full well. You can be your own worst enemy, even doing something like this. So how long, in your experience with young quarterbacks, how long does it take for them to get over, for lack of a better term, that ability?
I guess it depends on the quarterback. You look at Wilson with the Jets. He never got over it. Sam Darnold, when he was with the Jets, he had troubles getting over, the bad plays that he made.
He was seeing ghosts.
Exactly. He was seeing ghosts. So I don't think there's necessarily this hard line timetable of when a guy should and when a guy shouldn't. I think it's all about how you're coached, what you're coached to do, and the players you have around you, because ultimately you don't forget the bad plays. You never do. True competitors never forget the bad plays that they made. They may not want to talk about them, but they don't forget them, but they learn from them and move forward, knowing that if I don't do the things necessary, I can revert back to those things which I was doing that were not correct. So I don't forget about them, but I know that in order to not revert back to that, I know what I need to do moving forward. So I don't think quarterbacks ever forget. They know they know every interception they threw, just like they know every touchdown they threw. They know every bad read they made, just as they know every good. I guarantee you brought Tom Brady in here, or Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, one of these great hell, any one of the quarterbacks now that you consider, great, Mahomes. I guarantee they can tell you the bad plays or the bad throws they made, as opposed to all the good plays and the good throws they made. I guarantee they can tell you both of them.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. About Traylon Burks, Wes in Clarksville text in, someone needs to sign Burks up for flag football. Well, it is going to be an Olympic sport next time around. So next Summer Olympics, 2028, Los Angeles. So perhaps Traylon Burks might be available for that. We don't know what the extent of the potential injury is. As I mentioned, Teron Davenport and others have said that that Traylon Burks left practice early after attempting to catch a pass from Will Levis. We probably won't get an update on that until tomorrow. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, the AFC South as a whole, for many years, had been considered a laughingstock. The worst division, arguably, in the NFL. Sometimes not arguably, inarguably. I don't know. Who do I just say about grammar? Either way, has that tide turned? We'll get into that next. Adam Vingan in for Willy Donick, Derek Mason, ESPN 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willy and DMase, ESPN 1025, 1063 The Game. Adam Finken in for Willy Donick today. Derek Mason, Nick Frazier here with you. Some breaking news in the NFL. Bo Nix named the starter for the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix, who played roughly 16 years in college, will now start for the Denver Broncos in week 1. According to Adam Schefter, Nix will be the first Broncos rookie quarterback to start week 1 since John Elway. So Bo Nix will start for the Denver Broncos in week 1 against the Seahawks in Seattle. So a tough environment for Bo Nix, but he's about 40 years old. I think he'll be able to handle it. So, Derek, we were going to talk about where the AFC South ranks among the divisions in the NFL.
And we can still do it.
We can still do it.
Yes.
But during the break, the guy who holds this show together and the Chase and Big Joe show, Nick Frazier, walks in and says, I've got a clip from Calvin Ridley. Now, you might remember that last week, Derek got a little worked up about comments that Calvin Ridley had after practice about not running through his routes, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
We filled like
we
filled about 4 segments of one show with Derek just ranting about Calvin Ridley. The reaction was excellent. I advise you go back and listen to it where you get your podcast if you missed it. But according to our friend Nick Frazier over here, Calvin Ridley, not a response to Derek specifically, at least I don't know, I haven't heard it, but A to Z Sports caught up with Calvin Ridley after practice. This is what Calvin Ridley had to say.
Coach expects us to go ahead and be good every day. So, I mean, we gotta be good. You were the top wide receiver free agent, pretty much the gem of this class for this organization. Yes, sir. Do you feel any pressure? Nah, man. Pressure for what? Just to fulfill the contract. Are you a proven guy? I ain't proven it. Good. I've been good. I've been playing for what would you say is the key, like, to maintaining that mindset that helps? Because I played football a long time. It gave me a guarantee. My money's guaranteed. So it's more like perspective. It's more. I love football. I've been playing football since I was a kid. I didn't forget the money. I'm here because I chose this team and I want to continue to play football.
Are you a prove you wrong guy? When I mean, a lot of people have something to say about Calvin Ridley and who you are right now, and your contract. And does that take it personally when you head into a season to try and prove people wrong?
I really don't care. I'm here to help my team. You've seen it before. You mentioned Matt Ryan, obviously Trevor Lawrence last year. Now you're seeing Levis. So are there any early indications where you're like, man, I think he could be that guy? Not them, but just like that guy for you. I mean, we just gave it up one damn time, man. When the season comes, we'll see.
Where does your extra motivation come from? Is it about trying to
I got
be better than you were last year?
I got kids. I got mouths. I got kids. I got teammates, man. We work together.
Are you chasing the ghost of having your best season? What are you aiming for when you go out there?
Just be good. Play good, man. Who don't want to play good?
Sure.
Appreciate it.
That was Calvin Ridley apparently in a hurricane.
Sorry, I can't really help that.
Of course not. But
the comment he made in the middle of the clip, I'll try to get a better, audio of that. But that was kind of the direct, I guess, quote from what y'all were talking about last week when DMase was talking about, the effort on the field and such. So I'll try to get better audio on that.
So Derek, from what you were able to hear through the windstorm or swirling around Calvin Ridley, what do you make of that after what we talked about last week?
I mean, listen, regardless whether you feel it or not, when a team brings you in as one of their top free agents, and they pay you the money that you are making, the pressure's on. Now, how you react to that pressure, that's different. Everybody can't react positively, or they don't react positively to being that guy or girl and having that contract and that responsibility. So it's not like a crazy question, because we've seen guys come in, not necessarily come in here, which we have seen, but go from one team to the next. And because of the contract and the expectations You know, they never meet him for whatever reason. So it was a legitimate question. You know, and I think his answers were, his answers were right on par with what somebody should say. You know, there's no pressure, and I'm just here to win for my team, and you know, it's not about the money. Well, it is about the money. Don't lie about that. I mean, it's always about the money, because if they wanted to pay you $5, you wasn't gonna come here. You were gonna go somewhere else. So, but that's neither here nor there. But I just, you know, guys, when guys say that, it's like, come on, really, man. I know you really don't mean that. I know it probably wasn't high on your list, but if the Titans wanted to pay you $10 million to come in and be their wide receiver, I guarantee you'd have been saying, thank you, Titans, but no, thank you. I'm going to go somewhere else where I can get paid a little bit more for my services, because I know what I bring to the table. So, you know, inevitably it is about the money at the beginning, but then you want to prove to, you know, your respective team that you by them signing you to this huge contract, they made the best business decision for this organization, because you want to go out there and you perform. When I left here and went to Baltimore and signed my deal, I knew there was an expectation. I knew there was a pressure. I knew all of this stuff surrounding me was going to be there. But I took it in stride and I ran with it. I enjoyed it. I marveled in it. I sort of bathed in it. The you know, the sort of, you know, what comes along with that huge contract and you being the number one guy, the pressure. I loved it because I knew I was going to excel at it. I had excelled at every level when the pressure was on me to play at that position. And this was no different. And yeah, they paid me handsomely to do it. If they said, Derek, we're going to pay you this amount of money, and I feel it wasn't worth who I was as a player, then I wouldn't have took it. So it is about the money. It is about prolonging your career. It is about being the greatest athlete or the greatest receiver you can be for this team. And it is about your family. It could be about all that stuff. So, you know, but I think he answered it, you know, pretty much the way an individual of his stature or somebody they brought in to be that number one guy would answer it. So I have no problem with it. But, you know, he has to prove to people that because your last team didn't want you. That's what you got to always remember. As good as you played last season, and they could have paid you, your last team chose not to re-sign you. They allowed you to hit the market. That alone should be fuel for you.
So, according to overthecap.com, there are 3 wide receivers with more fully guaranteed money this season than Calvin. I'm sorry, over the course of the contract, not this season, than Calvin Ridley. Would you venture to guess who those 3 receivers are?
Justin Jefferson,
Yep.
Tyreek Hill.
Yep, that's 2 of the 3.
And
if you need a hint,
no, I don't need a hint. Tyreek Hill, and not Keenan Allen, not Evans.
No.
Boy, why am I forgetting this? There's so many damn good receivers out there. I was gonna say Chase, but he hadn't signed his contract yet. CeeDee Lamb hasn't.
Nope.
Give it to me.
Our old friend AJ Brown.
Oh, why did I forget about AJ Brown?
In terms of fully,
because he redid, he got a contract extension.
Yeah. So according to overthecap.com, the only 3 receivers in the NFL with more fully guaranteed money in their contract than Calvin Ridley: Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown. To round out the top 5, DJ Moore underneath Calvin Ridley. So that's your top 5 in terms of fully guaranteed money. Now, Calvin Ridley is a good player. I don't know. I would put him on the same stratosphere as Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and AJ Brown.
No, I wouldn't. I think he's a damn good player. And I've always said that about Calvin Ridley. Again, I thought the Titans should have went and got him when he was suspended. But they chose not to. They chose to go a different route. But ultimately, they got him on the team. But I don't think, you know, based upon the numbers in his play, I'm just basing it upon statistics and what those guys have been able to do compared to him. He's not in their class. I'm not saying he would never be in their class, but at this point in time, he's not in their class, but he's still a damn good player. So the Titans are putting a lot in their Calvin Ridley basket. They're putting a lot of eggs in their Calvin Ridley basket, and rightfully so, because they haven't been able to get a receiver to reproduce what AJ did his years here in Nashville. D-Hop was able to produce last year, but he's getting older. You need somebody like Calvin Ridley that can, kindly tap D-Hop on the shoulder, say, "Can I have that torch, please? Just kindly, can I have it, please?" Take that torch and then run with it. They need him to do that as these other receivers starts to, as they accumulate seasons. They need that number one guy. So the pressure's going to be on him. I guarantee you. Let him drop a few balls in the game. He's going to really see how much that pressure is going to ramp up.
So we had some guesses as we were trying to play the guessing game here on the text line, just for kicks and giggles. Here's the top 10 wide receivers in terms of fully guaranteed money in their contracts. Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown, Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, which was kind of shocking, but new team for Jerry Jeudy, Michael Pittman, Deebo Samuel, Chris Godwin, and Amari Cooper. I think that's 10. That might have been 11. Yeah. I never really learned to count. So Calvin Ridley, these were his just straight numbers last season for the Jaguars. He had 76 receptions on 136 targets, 1,016 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns. So he caught 55.9% of his targets last season. So there's a lot that goes into this, Derek, in terms of the success of a receiver. But in your mind, to justify the price that the Titans paid Calvin Ridley, all that fully guaranteed money and such, what are the baseline numbers that we should expect from Calvin Ridley? Let's just keep it to receptions, yards, and touchdowns.
I don't think he leads this team in receptions, but based upon his contract and what they expect of him, what he had 76 last season.
He had 76 receptions last season.
He should at least have 80 to 85 receptions.
So who leads the team in receptions? Hopkins, if healthy.
I think Hopkins or either Tyler Boyd, because I don't think what I am expecting from Calvin Ridley and what he may get is two different stories. I'm expecting at least 80 to 85 catches because he did 76 catches and he really wasn't on the same page with Lawrence. And he really wasn't the number one. Christian Kirk, they loved Christian Kirk and what they like to do as far as from a passing game standpoint. But when he got hurt, that really elevated, Ridley. And I just don't think Ridley and Lawrence were ever truly on the same page. And then that was his first year back from the suspension and what he had been dealing with in Atlanta. So he had to get his footing. So this year, another year removed from all of that stuff, 80 to 85.
Okay.
He needs to have between 12 and 1,400 yards.
Okay.
He has to be I'm not going to say he has to be a double-digit touchdown guy, but at least 8. He has to have at least 8.
So matching what he had last season.
Because 1,600 yards, Nick Westbrook-Akine can do 1,016 yards if they throw the ball to him enough. I believe that he can do that under the right system. So when you say 1,000 yards in an 17, 18 game season, that doesn't, when you look at it now compared to 15, 20 years ago, 1,000 yards is a lot more attainable now because of how they pass the ball, the rule changes and everything else. And he's the number one guy. So if he walks away with 1,016 yards, I'm like, man, they could have got that from Nick, and I'm not saying it's bad, but you paying Nick $2, $3, $4 million. He could have gave you 1,000 yards if he's a starter, if he's throwing the football enough and he's targeting him 140, 50 times, he should be able to do it too. No, Calvin really needs to set himself apart from everybody else. I'm not saying he's not going to do it. I believe he will. But when I'm looking at him, I need to see he looks different from everybody else.
So at least 80 receptions, at least 1,200 yards, and at least 8 touchdowns.
Exactly.
Okay. I think that's doable. And by the way, I was just curious. I went and looked at the Jaguars receiving ledger from last season. My eyes just bulged out of my head. He was second, by the way. Ridley was on the team with receptions with 76. Evan Ingram
Yeah.
had 114 receptions last year.
Yeah, because they started going to Evan Ingram.
Yes.
Because Christian Kirk
That
missed all the time.
That is true. It's just an eye-bulging number. Evan Ingram, 114 receptions last year. To your point, Kirk played in 12 games last year, 57 receptions. Travis Etienne had 58 receptions out of the backfield for the Jaguars. Zay Jones had 34 receptions in 9 games, 7 starts for the Jaguars. So that's Derek Mason's baseline for Ridley. At least 80 receptions, at least 1,200 yards, and at least 8 touchdowns for the amount of money that they are paying Calvin Ridley. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com. Coming up next, a former member of the Titans is back in the news cycle for one reason, but I want to talk about this person for another reason. 615-737-1025. Adam Vingan, Derek Mason, 1025-1063, The Game.
All right, let's tell you about Loan Pronto. Great to be back in town here, and there's great news for homeowners. Mortgage rates are lower. They're tanking. My friends at Loan Pronto have rates that start with a 4, so this is the best rate in years. Don't wait any longer. If your current rate is higher than that, over 6% maybe, you can dump it and lower your house payment big time. Loan Pronto has locked in folks recently at 4.99% APR. That's a big improvement for you. What does that mean? It means you pay less each month. And if you're in a process with another lender, stop now and listen to what Loan Pronto has to say, because they have the zero cost rate reduction home loan. You can lock in a lower rate with no closing costs in a matter of days, with almost no paperwork, usually no appraisal. And if you act now, you could even skip your next 2 house payments. So call now. Loan Pronto can give you a rate quote in just minutes with no hard credit pull and no upfront fees like the other guys. Call 615-499-5780. That's 615-499-5780. Or go to loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781. On approved credit, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
Willy and DMase, ESPN 1025, 1063 The Game. Adam Bingen, Derek Mason, Nick Frazier here with you. Coming up after our show, Jake Lyman, Teron Davenport filling in for Jared on Stillman and Company from 2 to 6. So, Derek, as you well know, there is a new documentary out as part of the Netflix Untold series about Steve McNair. The Murder of Air McNair is the title. Now, the Manti Te'o, that was part of the Untold series. I watched that one.
That was pretty good.
The one about Tim Donaghy, the NBA referee. There's some good. There was one about Johnny Manziel.
Yeah,
you know they're all interesting. It's all about nostalgia at this point. Unfortunately, in this case, it's not nostalgia that we look back to fondly, of course, with the death of Steve McNair. But I don't know if it was done in conjunction with the release of the documentary, but ESPN, Harry Lyles Jr. had a great story on ESPN that was released yesterday, talking about Steve McNair's groundbreaking 1994 season at Alcorn State. And when I read what Steve did, it's a great story. I suggest you read it in your spare time. But there's just a part where Lyles just lists what McNair accomplished in his senior season at Alcorn State. And it's just mind-boggling. He threw for 5,377 yards and 47 touchdowns. He rushed for 904 yards and 9 touchdowns. He became the first player from a historically black college or university to land an invite to the Heisman Trophy ceremony. He finished third and eventually became the highest drafted HBCU offensive player ever, when, of course, he was taken with the 3rd pick in the 1995 NFL draft. And, of course, know what Steve McNair meant to football here in Tennessee. So, Derek, I know you played a long time with Steve McNair. You know firsthand the brilliance of Steve McNair. And there was a quote in the story from one of his old teammates. I'm trying to find it here. It was at the bottom of the story. And the teammate said, quote, "For people that never saw him play, just understand that at the time it was something different." So, Steve, when Steve had this season, you were in college or just about to start college?
It was my 2nd year. I got to college in 93.
Okay, so you were a sophomore. You were a sophomore at Michigan State. What do you remember about hearing about Steve McNair at Alcorn State back in 1994? Of course, who knew you guys would become teammates for a very long time? But thinking back to what you remember hearing the first time you saw McNair play, what do you remember about that season?
He was phenomenal. So phenomenal that he landed on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Indeed, he did.
I don't know how many HBCU players have landed on the cover when they were in college.
And that meant something, by the way.
Yeah, that meant a lot.
That was a huge thing.
Their publications were everywhere. When you landed, on the front cover of that publication, that meant like, okay, he's him, as the kids say nowadays. He's him. So it read what? Give him the Heisman or hand him the Heisman, something like that.
It was hand him the Heisman.
Yeah. So you looked at that and as a player, because when I was coming out of college, and they wrote up, it was an article write up on me when I was coming out of high school, when I was going into college, and TSU was one of the schools that I thought about going to. But TSU, because my football coach slash track coach was a HBCU grad. And for track purposes, he would send, his runners would normally go to HBCU. And at the time, I started running track before I started playing football. And I was a pretty good track runner. So I thought in my mind, like, yeah, I can go to HBCU, Tennessee State, all these great track runners that have come out of that university. So I was thinking about it more so from a track standpoint, and then possibly play football. So it was on my short list, but that was after my junior year. Then once I became a senior, started getting notoriety, started becoming a bigger player in the world of, recruiting. It changed. It shifted a little bit. So you always sort of follow guys that came out of HBU, at least myself. And to watch Steve McNair do it in the fashion that he did it was something that we hadn't seen in a very long time from a African-American quarterback. We've seen Doug Flutie. I saw Doug Flutie do it at Boston College. Him running around, throwing the ball so much so it ultimately won him the Heisman. Everybody remembers the fateful Hail Mary throw he made at the end of the game. I think it was versus University of Miami. I may be wrong on that one. So that helped propel him to win the Heisman that year. But you didn't see, they weren't showing too many black quarterbacks do the things that Steve did. He did it so well that he stood out amongst quarterbacks, period, in college football. And you just saw the way he ran around, the way he launched the ball with the power, and him not guys trying to take him down. The stuff that we see Patrick Mahomes doing now, running around, throwing the ball, doing all this. Steve was doing it, not the behind the back stuff I'm not talking about, but just eluding defenders, them almost having him finding a way to get out of it and then launching the ball 40 or 50 yards down the field. He did that with his eyes closed, basically. He was a phenom in college. You had to be a phenom for them to invite you out of a HBCU, to invite you to the Heisman, ceremony. You had to have been that guy amongst all the guys in college football. So those are the things that I remember. We, remember guys talking about, what he was doing at Alcorn State and where was he ultimately going to get drafted? And was he going to be able to do that again in the NFL? Because this was all during the time of the run and shoot too. So teams were throwing the ball across the yard, but they wasn't doing it in the fashion Steve McNair was doing it. So I look back on that time and it was just like, wow, this dude, like, he's good. He's really good. Never did I think I would be playing with him. And then when I got here, it was like, oh, Steve McNair. Oh my goodness. I watched this guy when I was in college play. So that's what I thought. And that's what I knew of Steve McNair when I was in college. And then once he got in the NFL, I was still in college. So I sort of forgot about him. He didn't play much his first 2 seasons anyway. But then getting the opportunity to play with him, he was all of that in a little bit more. It's just sad that he didn't play in the era of throwing the football around the yard like these guys do now. Had he played in this era, I mean, it would have been nothing to see Steve throw for 4,500 yards in the NFL, close to 5,000 yards. We just didn't play in that NFL, and nor was our offense, built like that. It's so much so, Adam, you watch the whole Steve McNair thing that Netflix putting out. Jeff Fisher even says in it, like during the Super Bowl, like we were trying to be a team we were not, throwing the football around the yard. No, we had to get back to who we were, our identity, running the football and playing hell of a defense. And that's what got us back in the Super Bowl, along with his toughness and his resilience, meaning Steve McNair.
So, by the way, in 1994, when McNair finished third in Heisman Trophy voting, Rashaan Salam, the running back out of Colorado, won the Heisman.
He rushed for 2,000 yards that
year.
Yep,
2,055 yards and 24 touchdowns for the Buffaloes. There's another quote in this article. It's actually from the same teammate, Mike Ellis, who was an offensive lineman on that Alcorn State team. He said, quote, "You know how people talk about Caitlin Clark now? If we were to come to your venue, we were going to sell your venue out because people wanted to see the show."
He was much watched. I'm telling you, he was much watched television because of what he was doing from the pocket and outside the pocket. He was, because we had seen, not so much in college, Randall Cunningham when he was in Nevada. I didn't watch Randall Cunningham when he was in Nevada. I'm not sure. Maybe he could have been the same quarterback he was in the NFL or not. I don't know. But you watch a Randall Cunningham in the NFL, you were seeing some of the things that Randall was doing when he was with Philadelphia. But when you saw Steve, any venue that he went to, I'm sure in college, they sold out. Why? Because they wanted to see the human highlight. Just think of Michael Vick when he was in college, or Lamar Jackson when he was in college. They were must-watch television. It was like, he's on, or we got to watch him. I'm sure that's how Steve McNair was back then, either when they were on television, which probably wasn't much, or when he went to your venue. You wanted to watch him play. That's how electric he was.
You can ask Jake Lyman in there about prime Michael Vick at Virginia Tech, and Growing up in Virginia, I watched plenty of Virginia Tech football.
Much watched television.
It was
Michael
a big
Vick.
it was a big deal for Vic watching him, and then when Matt, when he was in Madden finally, like you raced your friends
exactly
to try to get the Falcons. So
now, wasn't didn't his brother play quarterback?
Marcus Vick.
Yeah, he was nothing.
Marcus
like,
Vick was
he
not
was nothing like Mike.
Marcus Vick did not. They say the apple didn't fall far from the tree. I mean, I know it's about parents and stuff, but in terms of brothers, that was a completely different tree. And
according to Jake Lyman, Marcus got kicked off the team.
Did he? Oh wow! Yeah. See, there you go.
Yeah, Marcus actually did play one NFL game as a receiver in 2006. So his name does appear on Pro Football Reference. But yes, Marcus Vick did not. He did not share those same traits as Michael Vick. Quickly before we go, Derek, once you became teammates with Steve, was there a moment in a game, in a practice, where your jaw was on the floor watching him do something when you were his teammate that, as you said, wow, this guy is my teammate? Was there a particular moment that comes to mind?
We were playing Pittsburgh, and I think this may have been the year Steve hurt his sternum. He took a hit in Kansas City that I don't think any quarterback today would be able to take that hit and still come back and play during the season. I don't think they would have. They would have been out for the season and probably been out a little bit longer than that. But Steve took that hit against Kansas City, and we just thought it was over with. Like, he's done. He's done for a couple of games or whatnot. But I remember us going to Pittsburgh. Neil O'Donnell was the starting quarterback, and Neil ended up getting hurt. Mac was never supposed to play. He had on his jersey. He had everything fully ready to go, but we didn't think that he would play. Neil was doing a great job. We didn't think we needed Steve at that moment. Neil goes down. Steve, without much warm-up, and I guarantee you this, I watched it. He threw the ball warm-ups maybe 5-10 times. Took off his coat, threw the ball around 5-10 times. Let's go. He led us down the field to a game-winning drive. He hit, who did he hit in the corner of the end zone? Tight end. Why am I forgetting his name? Aaron Kinney. He hit Aaron Kinney at a corner, right side of the corner of the end zone. Aaron Kinney was running a corner route. He hit him for the winning touchdown. I was like, wow, he's that dude. He didn't practice all week. He didn't even think he was going to play. They had to suit him up because we had no more quarterbacks. So he had to be the backup quarterback, but he was like emergency. And he came into the game, and he led us at Three River Stadium. He led us to a victory in that game. I was like, yeah, he's that dude.
That's a great place to leave it for today. Willy Donick will be back in tomorrow. Coming up next, Jake Lyman, Teron Davenport in for Jared Stillman and company. 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Be loved, love on your people, love on your neighbor. Have a wonderful and blessed Wednesday. I want to say I love you, Lexi. She's gone. We lost her yesterday, but have a blessed and wonderful day. You brought a lot of joy and happiness to our lives. Peace.
One last call.